The Morning Dump from Hurrdat Sports with Andrew Rogers and Damon Benning.
Get your podcasts. It is Morning Dump, and we are back. Coffee and cream in the morning. Cuts off. So what do? We come here to give our extended thoughts that we can't get to on the show. So, oh, geez.
What happened?
It went up like 8 octaves there.
Well, it's just showing your range. I mean, I get it.
I just wanted to show off my skills. You know, if I was going on AGT, at least I can hit the high note.
The man's got range. Aren't they? Isn't this the All-Star session? Like, would you fit in an AGT?
Would
they bring back all past winners?
I would be a better Terry Crews than I would be a contestant.
Terry Crews. Boy, has he had an interesting career.
I just can't pop the pecs. I look just like him outside of the fact that I can't pop my pecs.
Unfortunately, they can't have one of my favorite golden ticket winners because she has since passed away, but R.I.P. Nightbird. Shane, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
I mean,
she was a golden ticket winner.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder if one of Nick Cannon's 700 kids are going to take over that show at some point.
I wonder who's still falling for that.
Nick Cannon?
Yeah.
The Nick Cannon life?
Apparently Fertile Myrtle.
I feel like he has to have his own app. You know, like how Tinder's a thing. I just don't
the
Cannonites come together.
It clearly appears to be intentional. But why?
He likes money from the government?
Well, how is he getting any? He's giving it away.
Don't you get a lot of money from the government when you have a kid?
No. I mean, maybe one couple times for a tax break, but he's probably hitting that crescendo in like one fell swoop.
Right. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe I'm not going to ask him. Hey, man.
You want to shoot him a text?
I mean, to each their own. Who am I to judge? Who am I? It's the Lord of all the earth.
Great song.
Would care to know my name.
I don't think Nick Cannon in that song go in the same light.
No, not so much.
I don't think so. Hey, you know, something that we didn't get to on the show, and we haven't gotten to it yet, so let's get into it now, was the firing of Cliff Kingsbury. And just a month ago, I said Cliff should not be fired. I don't think Cliff has done enough to get himself fired, let alone be on the hot seat. I thought his seat was just warming up. I didn't think he was hot. And
that was one of our more spirited discussions.
Here's why. You know, he experienced moderate success. You know, he led Arizona to the playoffs, and his first 3 seasons went as so. 5-10-1 in 2019, 8-8 in 2020. And then 11-6 in 2021. But this season, we saw some drop-offs, right? They underachieved. They played undisciplined football. How much of that is Cliff's fault? Now, you were without DeAndre Hopkins for the first 6 games of the year. Kyler Murray was in a whole nother world. Plus, you were without him for the last 5 games of the season. Zach Ertz was out for some time as well. I think almost half the season. And then the Cardinals were without 5 starting offensive linemen for stretches this season. Yes, you still want to be able to put up a fight, but how much can you expect from a guy that's without his top receiver, the quarterback of their future, one of the best tight ends in football in Zach Ertz? And when I say one of the best, it's not like a huge spread. Yeah, he's not in the top 1-2. Well, 1A being Travis Kelce, 1B being Mark Andrews, but not so much later on in the season, and then the rest so forth down the list. I think the reason that he got canned wasn't because of the success that we saw in the one-season drop-off. Now, we have seen a lot of coaches get canned because of one bad season after making it to the playoffs. Like, that's happened before. I mean, we just look at what happened to Frank Reich this year. I think that team was so much better last year than, this year, obviously. But, I think it kind of goes in the same light when you talk about NFL coaches. It just seems like he lost his locker room. And Cards owner Michael Bidwell said this: I've been speaking to some of our leaders, and we want to make sure that we've got the culture of that locker room. The culture of our organization is really focused on maximum effort and making sure we do everything we can to win the NFC West. If your owner is saying this, he's hearing the players talk about culture of the locker room, that's the reason Cliff Kingsbury's not the head coach anymore.
Yeah, but that's part of it, right? I mean, the ability – because I think that's really what the NFL is and I know sometimes we dumb it down and we're like, oh, man, they're paid professionals, they've got a job to do. But really, I mean, the cohesive locker rooms are ones, at least in my opinion, in my limited experience, work the best. And I saw it firsthand, right? I saw a team in the Carolina Panthers play for an NFC championship against Dallas, and the very next year, the next 2 years, really struggle with basically the same team, except for the additions of Michael Barrow and a couple of other free agent acquisitions. But it primarily was because of what happened in the locker room with Kerry Collins and Wesley Walls and Lamar Latham and Michael Barrow behind the scenes. And so same coaching staff, Chick Anderson, running back coach, Joe Pendry, offensive coordinator, Dom Capers at the helm. And same team, different chemistry. And I think it matters. And when the coaches can't command the leadership, and there was some strong leadership, Sam Mills, John Casey, but it wasn't enough to supersede what was going on at the quarterback spot, in my opinion, with Kerry Collins, who was coming off a very tumultuous fall camp, right? Not spring training, it's baseball. With reporting during, what's the period that I'm drawing a blank? Your off season. It's not spring training. It's fall camp, I guess, is what I would call it in the NFL, right?
Yeah.
So I think chemistry is super important, even at the professional level. But I think his finishes, ultimately, like what happens in the second halves of seasons for Cliff Kingsbury is what I think the issues are. Because even in 2021, where you referenced the record and the improvement, I mean, they started 7-0, right? So, like, what happened after that? What's with the swoons? And it appears to be the lack of adjustments and the inability to adapt, I think, was as much as anything, which is probably part of the contribution for why you're losing the locker room.
I think he would make a great OC somewhere because that's his strong suit. And
some have him rumored like winding up in Iowa, and I'm thinking to myself, would you go back to the college game?
I wouldn't. I think he'd have a better chance at going to Tennessee and being their OC.
As in the Titans?
The Titans.
Yeah. It's going to be curious. I mean, he's going to have his suitors, right? I mean, he's going to have his particular.
And I saw Frank Reich today is interviewing for the Panthers job, if I'm correct.
Yeah, the shine came off of Frank Reich in a hurry. And I don't know how much of that is on Ballard, who fell on the sword. But then again, this is the same franchise that said they're still strongly considering Jeff Saturday as their head coach. And so I don't know how a guy that we held in pretty high regard. Remember when we thought the Colts were a quarterback away after we saw the job that Reich did, especially with that healthy offensive line and running the ball and
10-6, 7-9, 11-5, 9-8, and then he gets fired after week 9 this year.
It's tough.
What?
Right? We thought Frank Reich was.
You know what I mean? Like what?
Kind of how we felt about Doug Peterson.
Yeah, right? Same way.
NFL, right? They joke. They think it's just about players.
That coach will make another team happy.
Oh yeah, but it does stand for not for long. Because if you're not winning in that business. Man, it changes in a hurry.
And it's so funny that you say that because you have you have 3 winning seasons, but 2 of them led you to the playoffs. And that's what's even crazier, that doesn't even get taken into consideration anymore. It's like, hey, you didn't win this year. Guess what? I'll find somebody that will win this year.
Yeah, you know who the Eagles won that, and Peterson won that Super Bowl against? That's that guy named Bill Belichick. And that quarterback named Tom Brady.
That's somebody that gets to the playoffs. That's somebody that wins consistently.
Yeah, that's somebody that's got Jacksonville in the playoffs. And by the way, speaking of that, has your opinion changed on Coach of the Year now? Are you in on the Doug Peterson
I've always been in on Doug.
Over Dable?
Yes, I would say so.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
I've been a Doug fan for a long time.
Did you see some of the lineups that the Giants were trotting out with injuries this season?
Totally. I'm with you. Mm-hmm.
I mean, hard.
I just love the way that Peterson coaches.
And the NFC East is by far
so good.
By far a better division than the AFC South.
Yeah. Definitely a tougher division to get into the playoffs, especially when you're dealing with a team like the Eagles already.
Three of your four teams are in.
Right. And then the Cowboys were competing for the 1-2.
And the Commanders took it down to week 17.
I think it'd be crazy not to even consider Andy Reid for Coach of the Year.
No, I'm with you on that. I said that off air last. It's not.
Nick Sirianni's in the mix too.
Agreed. Sirianni's done a fantastic job, but it's interesting.
Dan Campbell's in the mix.
It's no question. It's interesting you bring up Andy Reid though, because I think you could make that argument. You know, sometimes I think he gets the Saban Belichick treatment just because you expect him to be good, and he has Mahomes, but. I mean, the Chiefs have been through a ton.
Well, and I told you that. I said if this team was as good as they were last year, right, which is what they look like on paper, then, you expect that out of Andy Reid. But nobody's talking about the job Andy Reid's doing with the players he has right now. This is a lineup that wasn't supposed to be as good as they are. Yes, with Patrick Mahomes, you can be, and they filled some holes on that roster well. But if the Chiefs were taking a dump this year, a literal morning dump, people would be hammering Andy Reid for the poor job he's doing mismanaging Patrick Mahomes. They need to get the running game going more. They need to get younger on defense. If they were 5-12, you would hear people hanging this man at the stake.
Hey, but could I convince you, though, that they have to have some success this postseason?
You could, but I think it's already in line for that.
Probably more for Mahomes than Andy Reid, but at some point, and maybe it's too soon because all he does is play in NFC Championship games and AFC Championship games.
And why do you say Mahomes? Why do you think it's bigger for Mahomes?
Because it's weird to think that he's, and I say this kind of tongue-in-cheek, the one Super Bowl.
Okay. So you think he needs more rings to his name because of how highly we talk about Patrick Mahomes?
I'm just trying to figure out can he perform at a level and win enough that fits what we think about him as a quarterback? 5,000
passing yards this year, 41 touchdowns.
I think he's the MVP. You don't have to tell me.
Hands down the MVP. I mean, this is more than he's had in his entire career.
I know, and there's not.
Except for 2018.
Outside of.
He was over 5,000 and had 50 touchdowns that year.
And I don't think outside of the Kansas City Chiefs fan base, and some of them would struggle to name me their top 3 wide receivers week in, week out.
Because it's all over the place. He does such a good job of spreading the football around. It's
been a handful for that franchise, I think, this year in terms of negotiating that wide receiving core.
It reminds me of what Tom Brady was able to do in New England. When you don't have like the best names out there in front of you, you have the one guy that you rely on. For this example, it's Travis Kelce for Patrick Mahomes. But everywhere else, you're spreading the ball around to some guys that just want to play with Tom Brady to win a Super Bowl. That's what we're going to talk with Patrick Mahomes about throughout his entire career. People are going to want to just go to that team for 1 year to win a Super Bowl. We've seen it already.
Yeah. I just get the sense that this is kind of a key stretch here for Mahomes because – And I remember talking to a couple of Chiefs fans, one in particular, in Gary. He was very reluctant, and I know why, right, in terms of assuming that you're going to get back to the Super Bowl with such a young quarterback because I think he understood it's really, really hard to do. So I'm not going to put some number on how many he has to win because, as I like to say, winning is hard. But, man, sometimes you get the sense – I think you think Mahomes should have more rings, but he hasn't played very long. He's becoming a victim. being his own
success.
He's his own benchmark.
Mm-hmm. It's worked out for the Patriots, though. I mean, they were a destination team where you go to for a year.
Just because you wanted to win with Tom Brady.
Like that's what the Chiefs are and will continue to be.
Yeah, but you're not scared by Hardeman, Valdez-Scantling, and Juju Smith-Schuster.
No, But what reminds me is just exactly like how all those New England offenses were laid out. You had the one guy, the big name, the Wes Welker of the world, the Rob.
So now you're giving that to Kelce.
And I'm giving that to Kelce, and then you surround him with a bunch of other, lower touted names. Like I don't even. That's not like the best way to put it. Like it's just like names that you wouldn't normally recognize.
Not a ton of number ones.
Right. Yeah. So
because he really doesn't have a number one.
Not at the receiver position, unless you talk about Travis Kelce being a receiver. You don't have a number one.
Yeah, he's not and I mean he makes all pros as a tight end, so I'm going to keep him as a tight end.
I'm curious to know what Sky Moore is going to be there.
He drives Chiefs fans crazy. I do know that.
I thought for sure he was going to be an impact player right away.
I was interested in Freivogel. They had a lot of guys.
I compared him to Tyreek Hill and in similar build in the way that he played at Western Michigan, but
I think the last third of the season with the
inexperience is shown with him.
Yeah, and consistency. And, there's been Kadarius Toney sightings now, too. So, I mean, but it's just interesting because the reason that they don't get the Minnesota Vikings treatment like the Vikings do as a team that is winning, even though that doesn't seem like they're playing all that well, is because people hold Mahomes in much higher regard than Kirk Cousins. Even though we went through the other day, Kirk Cousins is top 4 in the league in terms of
Do you think
passing.
Kirk Cousins is a top 10 quarterback in the league?
You could convince me. I for sure he's in 11, 12.
Yeah, I would leave him out of top 10.
It depends on what you do with Stafford. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of variables in there. And Stafford's one. Because I've kind of done these lists.
Stafford's kind of been that 11, 12 too.
And I think before he was closer to like 7, 8. Mm-hmm. So now I don't know. He's close.
It's just hard for me to call Kirk Cousins a good quarterback. It's hard for a lot of people to say, hey, Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback.
And he wins a lot.
He wins a lot, but I also think his inconsistencies are shadowed by the fact that his receiver, who's one of the best receivers in the league.
He's not throwing the ball to himself, though.
Right, but he makes up for bad throws because of how good Justin Jefferson is. So many throws this year, Justin Jefferson makes that play, and you're like, wow, what a catch by JJ. But no one's thinking about, hey, Kirk, why couldn't you just, throw it a little bit lower? Why couldn't you just throw it a little bit more to the right?
Maybe he didn't go to the right. Maybe he didn't move to his right position where he was supposed to be.
I mean, kinda. Cousins is pretty accurate.
I'm more on the inaccurate side of Cousins and how Jefferson makes up for those mistakes more than I am on Kirk Cousins being accurate. That's me. That's what I see.
I'm just not as hard on Cousins, I think, as some are. And I just look at, and I knew he was above 65%. He completes 66% of his passes.
Thanks to JJ.
There's no way. That makes my skin crawl just to hear that, because a guy has to get him the ball under duress and still be able to deliver. And because what we like to do is we say it the other way. Well, somebody's got to get him the ball if it's a good wide receiver. So and having played the total team game, I'm not just gonna. I can't subscribe to just one guy, right?
Just watch it. Maybe watch it in detail a little bit more.
Oh, and I do,
because you see the game so much differently than I do. So as you watch the playoffs, and I know the playoffs are a pretty tough standard. It's not like he's playing the Texans and you can really see him at work. But just in his playoff game this weekend, right? Mm-hmm. Just pay attention to him. See what you think. We'll revisit the conversation.
So Justin Jefferson's been in the league since 2020, right?
Yes.
Okay, those are Kirk Cousins has had 3 seasons previous, 18, 19, and 20, with a higher completion percentage since acquiring Justin Jefferson.
Jefferson, 1,800 yards, 1,600 yards, and 1,400 yards, going in reverse order.
I understood. but he's had 3 higher seasons without JJ. In 18, he was 70%.
Doesn't mean that, like, once he gets in, like, when JJ comes into the league, he didn't get inaccurate.
No, what I'm saying is if he was 70% without Justin Jefferson and he's 66% with Justin Jefferson in 2022, why do we give Jefferson all the credit that he's making Cousins?
Well,
Cousins is?
I think Cousins has taken a step back from where he once was. Like, now that he's getting older in age.
But we were talking about his accuracy.
Right. And as he aged, he got more inaccurate, right? Because you're saying he completed 70% 4 years ago. So 4 years later, I'm saying because he aged, he got inaccurate. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying is, and he's plenty young enough to not have age be an accuracy factor for me. So I'm not even thinking about his age. I'm talking about who he's playing with, like going from a Diggs to a Jefferson, or however that offense works.
I also think Cousins this year hasn't been anything. So
Cousins has to be doing something. It's not. It can't just be the receiver, because when it's just the receiver and he's not putting up the numbers, we always say, what about the quarterback? Well, who's getting him the ball?
I just think Jefferson makes up for more mistakes. Having a guy like Jefferson allows you to make throwing mistakes that end up not being mistakes. Yeah. That's just my point at the end of the day.
Because of the 14 interceptions?
And it's not even just that. It's just like I just see Kirk throwing the football, and it doesn't wow me ever. And Kirk's never been the type of quarterback to wow you. He's actually always been the one that's been targeted more than he has, given credit for the work that he's done. And I think he's done good work in the league. He's a very sound quarterback to have lead your offense. He's somebody that you can implement and think he'll get me to the playoffs. But there are pieces of his game that don't excite me, and one of them is
I get it.
It's
exciting.
I just think it's amazing how he gets. How we just poo him, and it's just like.
But I'm not even trying to like poo him in this light. All I'm saying is Jefferson helps his numbers, helps him be.
Well, yeah, I mean,
than he actually. I feel he actually is.
Well, I want to say no poop, right? Because I mean, you always want to play with, but better players can help you out.
1,000%.
So let's just assume that having good players helps, for the sake of the argument, right? Would 15 other teams in the league take Kirk Cousins?
If you had good players, yeah. He would be a quarterback on 15 other. He'd be a quarterback on any team in the NFL.
That's kind of how I think.
But I think he's very vanilla. You know what you're going to get with a guy like Kirk Cousins.
I mean, maybe, and this isn't the case for Cousins. I think it's more the case to have folks stop hating the way that they do on the Minnesota Vikings, because the offense a lot of times isn't their problem. They have a hard time getting stops.
Oh, defensively, they're brutal.
So
brutal.
But I'm telling you.
But man, I watch a lot of the NFC North games, as you know, and
they were my dark horse in the NFC going in. So I'm gonna stay with that, and they are my Chargers of the NFC.
Well, so we started this conversation by talking about culture, right? Losing the locker room for Cliff Kingsbury and rebuilding culture now. And a lot of teams have to do that. Nebraska's another team. This is what I want to end with. It's another team that is lacking spirit, lacking fire after Scott Frost. It's building back up, but it's a...
Yeah, Mickey had those guys playing hard.
Right, exactly. But now you're at a point, too, where you have a whole new coaching staff coming in. You have a lot of new bodies. Nebraska's also at that stage where they're rebuilding their culture, getting players to buy in now. And it starts with coaching from the top down. And so another conversation we had about a month ago where we were talking about the priority level of coaching ranks. And the head coach was at the top, but I said the strength coach actually came next. And that's just because he's the one that keeps you accountable. He's the one that keeps you fired up.
He's the one that they spend the most time with.
Exactly. And I think Corey Campbell will do a great job in the coming weeks to really kickstart I know he's side of the program.
I know he's got a couple of those guys like whoa already. So
and
it has not been easy sledding in that weight room up to this point.
You know, it's going to start with Corey Campbell, then it will follow with position coaches who spend also a lot of time with these players, and then it's also followed by Matt Rule, who's continually sparking and withholding these relationships with the current and former players. On paper, seems easy, right? Seems likely. Based on what we've heard, who we've talked to, high hopes are there for Husker fans, but I can also understand the hesitancy that comes along with it because deep down, right, their belief is that locker room can be restored. Everybody thinks that. But are these the right people to do it?
Everybody.
I think they are. I think this is the group that you'll finally start seeing some belief being restored.
I'm kind of with you on that, and I just think I know they're passionate about it, right? It comes up in their dialogue about the role that they play in terms of restoration and how it starts with them. And knowing is half the battle, and saying it out loud is part of it too, because like you can speak it into existence, and they're definitely embracing that. Like I'm with you on that I think they want to be the guys that are there for the young men in that locker room to be the bridge on how to be men. I think they're about that, and I think that's kind of how he went about choosing the staff. Now, we'll see what that means in terms of wins and losses because I don't know yet. It's pretty early. And they still have to be the guys that they say that they're going to be early on in crunch time because right now it's easy. Mm-hmm. So it's easy to kind of, rah-rah. Like, I get it. But there are enough tangible examples when I do listen to kind of the things that they're saying where I could be like, oh, okay, it's more than just words. Now, we'll see what happens in February and March, April, May, June, July, because people will poo-poo those and say that there's puff pieces and you can't gauge spring and all that. I don't buy any of it. I think it all matters, and the greatest amount of culture building happens in the off season, and so I don't poo-poo that at all. Champions are made in the off season. There's zero question in my mind about that, so I don't poo-poo any of it. I'm
excited. I think a lot of people are excited to know and see kind of what the future holds, right? You can think it, you can believe it, and hopefully you can execute it.
Yeah.
And I think at this point we're at a good stage to really start assessing what this Nebraska football program will look like. We'll continue talking about thoughts like these on the morning show, Coffee and Cream, which we love having you on. We love just having you there with us every morning. Give us a call, 888-638-4876, any morning that you want to share your thoughts too. You can follow Damon Benning on Twitter, and you can also hit him up on Twitter at Damon Benning. Myself,
Tupac style, hit him up. Mm-hmm. The greatest diss track ever.
And DB still believes Tupac is alive. So
I think he's moved, though. He may be down. I keep hearing, maybe
moved 6 feet under? Or?
No, from, he was kind of in that, the Italian region. I think he's down in the Auckland Islands now.
Is there a Tupac tracker? You know how there's a tracker for everything online?
Closer to New Zealand.
That's what you should start if there isn't. A Tupac tracker.
Yeah.
You just.
By the way, that hit 'em up track is NSFW. A lot of bad language in that
one. You can follow me on Twitter to completely get back on course at Andrew Rogers TV. The show, Morning Dump at Hurrdat Sports. The radio show at H Varsity Radio. We're having fun like we always do, and we hope you join us again tomorrow.